Health is a state of body and mind. Wellness is a state of being. We want you to have both. This is Channels of Health, the podcast giving you ideas and insights into new and time-tested avenues to health. From mental wellness and innovations in mental health to our daily lives and overall health journeys. Join your hosts, Patty and Damien, both founders of organizations dedicated to healing, as they bring candid conversations and new information to you. Let's start the show. Here are your hosts, Patty and Damien.
We have as a guest here today, Daniel Powell, who is a president and chief executive officer of Spark Biomedical. And he came all the way up from Houston to say hello to us. So thank you very much. It's so much more fun in person, I guess. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And I was born and raised in Dallas, so I'm a Dallas boy first.
Yeah. I thought you came up to see us, Daniel.
I did.
We're going to roll that back and give you another chance to say, well, of course I came up here to see you.
Yeah, I love you guys.
So
I just didn't want everybody going Houston, and then I got to explain it.
Then you gotta give the whole backstory.
Yeah. He really just wants to come up here and see family, but that's good too.
Yeah.
That's good too. So you have a really good story about your company and how you came about creating it. So do you want to start with some of that information so that the listeners are aware of this new entity, and then we can do a segue right into your technology?
That would be fantastic. So Spark Biomedical was born into existence about 2.5 years ago, August 1 of 2018 to be specific. Remember the date. And we have since built and tested clinically and have FDA approved for the Sparrow therapy system, which is a neurostimulator that helps bring people out of opioid withdrawal. So just to be very specific, it's a little earpiece that you put on your ear. It stimulates through the skin like a TENS unit would, and it drives a signal through the central nervous system that will bring somebody in full opioid withdrawal out of either a third of the patients were out of clinical withdrawal in 1 hour, and the other 2/3 were in mild withdrawal out of moderate. So a significant and fast impact for somebody going through that.
That is so remarkable that when I first heard it, I almost had to hear it multiple times because it wasn't really landing.
Yeah.
So everybody's somewhat heard about the opioid epidemic, if you will, whatever. Do you want to talk a little bit about how quickly you're going to be able to address that, how it's going to be used?
Sure, and we're saying we have an epidemic wrapped in a pandemic right now. So the opioid epidemic's been largely ignored for the last year. Behavioral health challenges are through the roof, and some of the primary drivers of addiction and behavioral health challenges like that would be tied to loneliness, lack of opportunity, isolation. And you take a pandemic and you lock people in their house, and you're watching the death toll go up on the TV every day. It has been a horrible trigger for relapse. And the industry estimates 30 to 40% increase in overdose deaths in 2020 over 2019.
Which was already at very high rates by then anyway.
Yeah, from 2001 to 2018, we saw an ever steady increase in overdose deaths, both all drugs and opioids specifically. Opioids, about 3-4 years ago, crossed the 42,000 person a year mark. That's how many soldiers died from America in Vietnam. So it's like we're having a Vietnam War of deaths every single year. And then that was at about 42, then it crept up closer to 50,000. And then 2018 was the first year we actually had a modest reduction in the number of deaths, but it's still an astronomical amount. And then 2019, it spiked way up, in 2020 now even further. So, it's a bad situation. And that's why that's $1 million question, how fast we can address it. So our product right now addresses acute withdrawal. So somebody who's in the middle of withdrawal, and that is the very first thing you have to go to if you're looking for a life of abstinence and off opioids. And we call it the 800-pound gorilla. It's just this monster you have to get through. Most patients, so I'm going to kind of answer your question, but the answer is it's going to take a long time. But the reason why behind it is most patients think they're going to die when they go into withdrawal. Like literally 99 out of 100 will say, I literally thought I was going to die. And the reason they say that is the part of the brain that's affected by opioids is the amygdala. That's what we say called the lizard brain, the ancient primitive brain that tells you, run, there's a saber-toothed tiger. Right. Like this is fight or flight, live or die. And when that's in a disordered state from a long-term opioid use, you're in fight or flight. You are in life-saving mode. So your rational thought to get through this, it's not a story of willpower anymore. I've really realized how mischaracterized this whole field is. I went into it, not knowing very much. I have a family member who's been addicted to heroin, and we just sort of never looked at it. Just kind of keep the blinders on. We know he went to jail. We don't talk about it. Versus now I can talk to family members and go, "What's it been like living with this?" Like really have compassion for the whole family going through addiction recovery.
You have a really special personal story that we touched on when we were on the phone a week or 10 days ago. Do you want to talk a little bit about the journey that you took to get to the creation of this organization?
Sure, and remind me what the journey was.
That's great.
Yeah.
Which journey are we talking about?
We talked about family members and how there was a time when it really didn't seem to resonate. There wasn't this passion. You have a passion for what you're doing now that has direct impact from some of your personal family stories on health and health-related issues.
Yeah, specifically, I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say. I didn't ask permission to talk about it.
Let's move on then. We don't need to. It's not a problem.
No, when you walk up to someone's dad and you realize their kid's been struggling with substance abuse and in and out of 20 treatment facilities easy and jail and never talked about it, and then I turned to his dad and I said, "What's it been like? What does this cost you? What does this look like?" And suddenly had the deepest, most personal conversation about the burden and him trying to save his family, basically nonstop. And to the point where at Thanksgiving we can just talk about drug use at a Thanksgiving table, and it's honest, and we're not denying it, we're not pretending it didn't happen, we're not treating it like a stigma. And the individual's hilarious about it. He should be a comedian because he goes, "I thought I knew how to cook meth until I went to prison, but now I'm a 5-star chef."
I'm a 5-star chef. Oh my gosh!
So you just let it be reality. And he's going through AA, and part of it is that talking through it and not hiding it and not lying about it. And I never. I know I've fallen on the camp of people who are addicted are weak, throwaway.
Sure.
And just the plight they're going through, and they have no one fighting for them, and they're hard to fight for too.
Yeah.
They can be, yeah.
Yeah, but the deck is so stacked against somebody who goes through this. Well, first of all, you get a felony if you get caught with even the smallest amount of drugs. Well, what does a felony mean? It means you will never have a real job ever again. You're done. You're not going to be a teller at a bank. You're not going to, you go to fill out that application. Do you have any misdemeanors or felonies? And the felony's going to knock you out nearly every time. So what did we just remove? Especially for a young man, a sense of purpose, ability to provide for his family. Well, I might as well just go back and use. It is the worst way to treat people who want to recover by handicapping all their means for a living and self-worth.
What a powerful story. And really, when you describe it, I really can imagine it. We have a mutual friend who has a program that helps prisoners who have been released, done their time, whatever, and she talks a lot about the difficulties, but the way you described it, it's like your family is really dealing with it head on. A lot of times we talk about reducing the stigma or trying to normalize the conversation, but You guys are the personification of it, I think.
Oh, thank you. I got inspired in my research. I came across something called the Portugal model. And it was funny, if you watch the presidential debates and leading up to and all the primaries,
right?
A couple of people would go, well, I believe in the Portugal model, but then it got real quiet. The Portugal model, Portugal had a horrible heroin problem. I forget how many years ago, if this was 20, 30 years ago. And they did something radical. They made heroin legal. But you had to go to a government facility.
Right.
You got clean drugs, not some junk from the street. Right. You got given a clean needle. You didn't have to go steal to get it. And there was no stigma. And there was somebody there ready to talk if you were ready to start to get well. And it sounds radical, but it would be interesting if we could try that.
No doubt. No doubt.
And say, because they're going to get it. They're going to find the drugs.
Right.
And so now they're in a back alley, and that amygdala misfiring, that fight or flight, that's when you make the worst decisions.
Of course.
You're making lifelong horrible decisions. And I'll describe that one individual. You're not getting high anymore. That's probably the misperception. Nobody who's doing heroin's getting high anymore. They're running from withdrawal every 4 to 6 hours. That's it. That is what the life becomes. And so this perception that they're chasing, with the term chasing the screen is,
yeah.
It is not, it owns their life.
Yeah.
That was a real learning opportunity for me. I never thought about it in those terms, but I'm glad that you remembered to bring that back up, because I don't think it's understood by anybody other than a family member or even the person himself that they're not getting high, they're running.
The heroin addicts that we used to work with, they would tell you they don't even remember the last time they were high. And I would hear that all the time. It was really confusing to me.
Yeah.
Because their whole life is ruined from something that they're doing all day, every day, but they're not even high from it. And I was a kid in this environment, I had no way of understanding, but it was so strange to watch a life completely destroyed. They wouldn't have their family, their kids, they can't get a job. But to hear that they're not getting high, it was always a total contradiction to me. And as a judgmental kid, I was like, you're getting high, right?
Yeah.
All these years later, I look at it, and it's like, what a absolutely horrific approach. And it doesn't seem like movies, this is a background area for me, movies and things don't seem to accurately really portray the torment.
But there's a movie called 4 Good Days. Just saw a preview today. I don't know how timely you want the podcast.
No, that's okay.
It's got
we'll figure it out.
Mila
Jovovich?
Kunich.
From the 70s Show?
From the 70s Show.
Okay.
And it's about her going through withdrawal to get through four days.
There you go.
And I got my hair stand up, like, it looks like it's going to tell the story.
Awesome.
It looks rough. She's doing the media circuit right now.
Oh, wow.
So it's a brand new.
Yeah, brand new release.
And the platform is Netflix or?
I don't know.
We'll figure it out. We'll Google it.
But
available on all streaming services.
There we go.
Nice.
Yeah. So tell us your professional background leading up to the new company and the creation of this device.
Sure. Pretty much, I went to Texas A&M University, so Giga Maggie's. And I actually went through the Corps of Cadets in that.
Really?
And quickly discovered I was like, I am not meant to be in the Army.
Let's stop on that.
Yeah. I was walking down the campus to sign my papers to go to officially enroll in the Army, and I could see the building in the distance, and I just froze. I was like, no, I know better than this. I was a business major. Actually, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I liked business in general. Got out and quickly found I was good at IT and went into IT. I went to EDS, Ross Perot's old company, bounced to KPMG and was an IT consultant. I was just sort of learning and figuring I just was always trying to figure out what I was supposed to be. Like, do I want to be a database administrator? No. Do I want to be an information security specialist? No. I'll enjoy it for 6 months to a year.
Right.
Learn a lot about it and then go do something else.
And had this I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and had this like we'd have garage sales as kids, and I'd be like getting the best prices on everything and shrewdly negotiating. So I was always kind of business minded. And I got this great idea to open an internet game cafe. It's called GameWise. I was up here in Plano, Texas, and I had like all high-end Herman Miller chairs and computers, and the kids would come in and play games. The adults would come in and play games and Xboxes. And it was a phenomenal way to lose a lot of money. Like I mastered, like, remember the movie Brewster's Millions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like this.
Well done. Let's see how much of this you can give away. Yeah. What year was this? How long ago was that?
2004 to 2004, I think.
Okay.
Maybe 2002 to 2006.
Gotcha.
And it was a huge failure, and I mean, it cost a lot financially and derailed sort of any normal career. So I was like done. My wife would tell me, she was like, look, Martha Stewart failed like 6 or 7 times before she did it. And I was like, well, I'm just doing this once. I'm just going to be an employee and take my paycheck.
Yeah.
And went back to work for EDS, and it was just depressing. And there's a little company next door to EDS called Advanced Neuromodulation Systems had a software analyst position open. Like I said, I was good with technology and good with IT and good at creating software programs. And I went and applied, and they said, you've never been in medical devices before, so I don't know if you can really make the transition. But I got hired and quickly got promoted in charge of that group.
So you made the transition.
I made the transition.
Yeah.
And then I'm not really good at IT and software engineering. I'm really mediocre at it in the long term. But I found I really have a knack. And I learned this at KPMG and EDS, like going out and eliciting customer requirements and figuring out what the unmet need was. Let's say that's the basis of what I realized I'd been training to do. And so they bounced me actually out of engineering into a marketing product manager position. And I got to launch a deep brain stimulation system in Europe. So I turn around, next thing I know, I'm flying to Europe every other month to support cases in Dusseldorf, Germany, and Warsaw, Poland, and stuff. So it was an amazing adventure. And I just found I fell in love with neuromodulation is neurostimulation. I fell in love with it. Fell in love with going to the classes and learning the anatomy and how this works chemically in the body and how these all reactions. And it was, I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and get to work and learn more. So that was almost 20 years ago. And so it really this is my second career. And I just loved it ever since. So I ended up working in spinal cord stim for chronic pain, deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's and essential tremor, basically movement disorders. Went down to Houston to work in vagus nerve stim for epilepsy, and then kind of bounced around. There was a lot of disruption in the medical device space because of the medical device tax that came in the Affordable Care Act. So it created a lot of layoffs because it was a 4% haircut off the top line tax. So there was a lot of disruption in the industry, but loved it and ended up going to work for a startup that didn't make it, unfortunately. But in that time there, I got over my fear of being an entrepreneur, and I was like, now that I've actually learned some life skills and know what I'm doing, like I was trying to be an entrepreneur, and I didn't have this wonderful tool back in the day called YouTube.
Right.
Like, so when I wanted to run a game store, when I wanted to run a medical device company and I hadn't raised money before, I could go to YouTube and I can watch some of the smartest people in the United States talk about raising money.
Yeah.
Just like that, and what my cap table should look like, just like that. And it's just a night and day I spent months watching, my wife would walk by and watching YouTube.
Yep.
So you really starting this company? Yes, I'm really starting a company.
From YouTube.
Little healthy skepticism there, yeah?
Yep. But it's funny you'd say that. We talk about that a lot. The amount of education and the amount of things that are just available specifically to YouTube, not all the other platforms. It's very, very rare when I need to search something that I don't find an endless amount of videos, around it. But people seem to still have, and I realize this isn't the subject, but people seem to not understand how accurate that a lot of that content is now. Like there's like this distrust but someone like you understood how to watch it and kind of rightly divide, get rid of some of the stuff that doesn't apply.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was interesting is, in my career, I've been in engineering. I knew how product development worked. I knew how the sales and marketing process worked, but I always had a regulatory person, and they did the regulatory stuff. And you would finish the product and throw it over the wall, and then they would do something to it, and then it would go to the FDA, and then 180 days later, they go, it's approved.
Right.
And they would send the email, and you're like, I want to send the email. I built the product. It was funny because suddenly starting a company and being in a position where I'm responsible for regulatory, I don't know. I know surprisingly little about it because I've never functionally done the job. But then I got on YouTube, and I was like, oh, this is what a 510K is, which is the regulatory path we took, and this is what I should expect. And those you do have to watch like 7 or 8 videos and compare, because it gets a lot of tribal knowledge in that stuff.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Tribal knowledge.
But yeah, that's just would help fill the gaps, and then until we could hire somebody who could own that role.
Talk a little bit about the whole FDA process. First of all, congratulations, because this is really recent and really exciting, and I want to give you a chance to blow your horn there. So they've got approved in January.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it was that recent.
Yeah, so this is like pretty close to cutting edge as we can have. So talk about the regulation approval that you went through, and then the science, and kind of help people understand what it is that you all can do.
Absolutely. So this is an FDA-regulated device, and everybody's probably a lot smarter about that after watching news on vaccines going through the FDA. It's been fun to the news is actually covering the process. When there's not a global pandemic and a presidential mandate, they don't move as fast as they've done with the vaccines. Imagine that.
Go figure.
And regulatory scares everybody. When I was raising money, everybody was like, can you get this through regulatory? And I was like, I know the process. The risk is low. It's like, you just need to do the process right. Those statements were wrong.
I'm here to tell you.
We did everything right, and we almost didn't get FDA approval. And I'll share that because it's such a frustrating. I wear my heart on my sleeve a little bit on this one. But you put all this time and money, and you have 15 people's careers that are providing for their family, weighing on an FDA approval, and it's a binary event whether you have a company or not.
Right.
And it's the only event that's completely out of your hands. Maybe the clinical results are out of your hands, but even that, you can go back and change the clinical design and then figure. Yeah. I guess if it just doesn't work, that's out of your hands. But in our case, the product worked really well. And we had, like I said, 93% of patients responded with a clinically meaningful response. You don't get numbers like that. That's inconsistent every time. It's about 53% drop in the withdrawal scale that they're measuring. And it's a scale that's been around for 30, 40 years. We found a heroin study in France in 1987 that used almost the identical scale. It's like the gold standard. It's called COWS, Clinical Opioid Withdrawal Scale. I'm totally going to get off the main question. So anyway, we had this great clinical effect. We did everything right. We did what's called a pre-submission, which you go sit down with the FDA before you do all the work. And you say, well, we agree this is the regulatory pathway. I'll do this work. I'll show this effect and the safety profile, and you'll approve it. And they said yes. And so we come back 2 years later, submit the paperwork, and they were like, because it was a different person. Totally. In 2 years, the whole department changed over, and they were not going to honor their word from 2 years ago. And we're like, that's your words. And they cost us an extra, it's supposed to be a 90-day review. They pulled a bunch of shenanigans. It took 6 months. Oh. That's 3 more months of burning cash. And I did not know. I got to a point, they started asking, the first time around, they asked really bad questions. And that's when you get scared. Because you don't actually understand what we're doing.
Right.
And they were like, well, why didn't 100% of your patients go on to medical-assisted therapy afterwards, like opioid antagonist medicine solution? And it's because some people, like AA, believes in abstinence from all medicine, non-pharmacological solutions.
Right.
I know, but this other study, because there were some acupuncture studies that it gave us the basis of where to go with this. Yeah, but in those studies with electrical acupuncture, well, yeah, but It doesn't mean, So, 90 more days of arguing with them. We had to escalate 2 layers up. We hired their ex-director to come to the meetings with us. You're good when you're getting on a meeting with all the directors and your guy goes, hey, it's Bob here. And everybody goes, Bob, on the FDA side. So you're like, all right. We started, I was calling my congressman. We're just doing everything. But they approved it 10 p.m., January 2nd. That's a holiday weekend because that was the deadline. There's like a regulatory deadline. Like they have a clock they have to meet. That's how long they took it to the last end. So we're all on edge the whole, yeah.
I knew that it had been delayed, but I didn't realize that they were literally running up against their deadline on a holiday weekend.
And they did it the first time they hit the deadline, and they're like, yeah, we're probably just going to reject this unless you want to retract it. And we're like, no, you didn't do your work. So,
unless you want to retract it.
Yeah, that's the game they always play. So the regulatory process, they're just humans, and they take, in every meeting, they tell you how overworked they are. Yeah, I know you're busy, but, you did take this job. So it is a frustrating process, and you do need experts on your side. And we were, our main regulatory consultants were great. They have 100 approvals under their belt, or 200, or more. Used to work for the FDA, and we still had to go get the boss of that specific group, who luckily had become a consultant, and still by the skin of our teeth.
Was there a primary kickback? Was there a primary thing that they just could not understand, or that they were concerned about, or was it just the general process?
It was, there had been another study with electroacupuncture that was accepted for an electroacupuncture device that had better results. There was an NPR article on condemning the FDA for accepting this study because it didn't meet any of their criteria. So when you do a clinical study, and it's okay to do a clinical study out that was done that way. It's just it can't be used to get an FDA approval per their regulations. And it was 2018. It's the height of the opioid epidemic, and awareness is finally popping. A product comes up that can help with withdrawal, and they were like, yeah. So the problem with it is it didn't have a control group. It didn't have patient consent. It didn't have any electronic control of the records. And several of the sites had like 40 patients, but they only took 7 of them. So that tends to call in question.
Yeah.
And so what you would like to see is that repeated in a controlled environment. So we did, and we proved what the results really are. And they're good. They're not that good, but they're still, very clinically meaningful.
Right.
And so they were like, yeah, yours isn't as good. And I was like, well, but you can't, our data is superior because it is better controlled. It has more scientific rigor. Mm-hmm. And that's
right.
My 2 founding partners, Alejandro and Navi. They're both PhDs in neuroscience and neuroengineering. We do good science. On day 1 of building Spark, we said, we're going to do this right. We're going to make sure when people look at our clinical data that they respect it. And then if the clinical data fails, then we don't go forward with that. We accept the real results and publish them. That's the other thing. So kind of a side note, a lot of times someone fails, they don't publish their failed study.
Right.
And we even agreed up front, if we fail, then we publish it and we give that to the community. Yeah. So we're definitely a very science-minded group.
Awesome.
So with you being so science-minded, can you kind of help walk the listener through some of the science behind this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the nice thing is, we didn't just figure this out brand new. We're standing on the shoulders of 50 years of neuroscience. And I have a recent funny encounter that I'll share with you. So we traced the clinical evidence of this technology back to 1947 in Russia for alcohol withdrawal with this big box called the electro-sleep device. It was originally, and it was kind of electroshock therapy. You put sponges on the head.
Right.
But it wasn't like bite leather or shock, but the temples are right next to the trigeminal nerve and can touch the vagus nerve, which is the ones we're specifically targeting. So it was having an effect. We just met a guy who went to Russia in the 80s to study that device, to bring it back to America, and Gorbachev shut down the country exporting any of their technology to America. So it floated its way down to France for that heroin study I told you about, but it never made it over here.
Wow.
I had no idea.
Wow.
So maybe if the electrosleep device had made it to America, Spark wouldn't exist. So I owe Gorbachev thanks for making Spark possible.
Thank you, Gorbachev.
Yeah.
Shout out to Gorbachev.
Yes, you know who you are.
So the science, and then the ability to miniaturize devices, not put a big sponge on, but use hydrogels to put it right on the nerve, and then all this functional MRI imaging that's happened before us. So all this is to say there's a ton of good studies that show us how to activate the vagal nerve system and the trigeminal nerve system, which are the two we're hitting. So what we do is we have this little earpiece. There's no needles or anything. It pushes the electricity through the skin, kind of like a TENS device.
Okay.
But we don't want to call it that because it's much more sophisticated than a TENS device. But and we push a high frequency 100 hertz pulse on the trigeminal nerve and a low frequency 5 hertz pulse on the vagus nerve where it comes up here in the ear. And that in turn drives two different mechanisms we believe based on all the scientific literature. One, it causes the brain to produce the endogenous endorphins that it can't really produce on its own because it has fallen asleep.
Right.
And those fill the vacant opioid receptors, the mu, kappa, and delta opioid receptors, the mu being the most important one. It also it brings up what we call parasympathetic tone, which that's your fight or flight mechanism. And so what that does is brings down the anxiety, brings up the control, that amygdala disorder, which causes people to think they're going to die. So we know it definitely has an autonomic balancing. We put a Holter monitor on every patient, and we could watch their heart rate variability increase, which is a sign of parasympathetic tone increasing. And so we can time their heartbeat changes directly with the stem. Like I said, we wanted to do the science right.
So cool.
And prove it.
Wow.
And so those effects basically and so that's within 60 minutes of stimulation, we're having a 53% reduction in withdrawal symptoms. More importantly was on day 2 when withdrawal really starts to get bad, and day 3, it held it down. They wear the device 24/7 or as needed for 5 to 7 days. That's an acute detox period. That's about what it takes to get opioids out of your system. Heroin comes out of the system really fast. It's like 3 days. Methadone comes really slow, might take 10 or 14 days. And then pills are somewhere in the middle, like at that 7 mark. And so ours was a 5-day study, and everybody was able to, once the withdrawal was under control, keep it under control for days 2, 3, 4, and 5.
That is just so exciting.
Yeah, it was really nice. Some patients took the earpiece off at night, went to bed, and the withdrawal didn't really come back till morning. We know there's a halo effect. We just didn't know how long they should wear the device. So we're like, kind of take a sledgehammer approach, like more stim is better.
Right.
I don't want them kind of rebounding out, and we didn't know what to expect. But the worst part of the clinical study was we had to push them into moderate withdrawal to then show a clinical effect of pulling them out, even though everybody would go into withdrawal. So we had to push everybody up to a Cal score of like 14, 15, 16. That was really uncomfortable. You're sweating, you're snotting, you're agitated, you're running to the bathroom every 10 minutes, your bones ache. Like I saw one video guy said it felt like 1 minute his bones were on fire and the next they were freezing. I mean, so we had to push them into moderate withdrawal, then to put the device on and then bring them down. Ideally, clinical practice, we expect doctors would you come in and we just put this on you. You don't need to ever go into moderate withdrawal. And hopefully if you get it on early, hopefully they never really experience withdrawal and can get through detox and then transition on to some type of long-term treatment.
And I'm sorry to ask, but what is a COW score?
Oh, clinical opioid withdrawal scale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
it's an 11-point scale. It measures pupil dilation, goosebumps on the flesh, aches and pain, gastric distress, all the symptoms of withdrawal.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So is the idea somebody decides needs to get off of specific drug, is the idea that they would put this device on before they get off, and then it would limit that whole process?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't need to go into withdrawal.
So you don't have to wait until they're within or anything like that?
No, that's just how we had to do the clinical design to prove it worked, because otherwise they go, well, how do you know that kept their withdrawal? Well, because 100% of people go through withdrawal. Like, it's not going to be a surprise. But our next study, so there's two main points I also want to make. On top of people going through substance abuse disorder, right? That's probably 4 or 5 million Americans that are considered addicted to opioids. There's 10 to 15 million Americans dependent on opioids with a legitimate prescription. So it'd be like my sister. She's been on methadone for Lyme disease pain for 18 years. She can't get off that.
Right.
Without her, we have a doctor, and she's going to him to get it. She's been waiting for the Sparrow to come out here for 2 years. She wants off. She just can't. And methadone's really hard to get off of. And it was a poor, negligent prescription 18 years ago. It doesn't work for chronic pain. The painkillers do not work for chronic pain. It's been proven over and over, and that's why Purdue is gone and under criminal charges, because and that's the whole thing we can get into, is just the whole opioid epidemic history of how we got here.
We talked about that.
I'm
good with that. Let's go ahead and talk about the...
But I don't want you to lose that point. You said you had 2 points.
Yes, sorry.
That's a third. So
it was the clinical design. Oh, and then the other thing, our next step is we believe this could be used for long-term addiction recovery. So we're about to start a clinical study and wear the device every day so we took secondary measurements in depression and PTSD scores and saw meaningful improvements in those scores as well. Clinical wasn't designed to prove it could do that, but we want to see an indicator, and that made sense. So our next step is to use the stimulator for the next 90 to 100 days, retrain the brain to produce its own endorphins, and manage anxiety, cravings, and PTSD or trauma. So but the underlying root behind most addiction is going to be trauma, behind a lot of behavioral problems. So we're going to be looking at that and see if we can improve addiction recovery outcomes, move from being a withdrawal company to an addiction recovery company, and prevent relapse. So that's our next big, audacious goal. The study is really cool. It's got like all these different arms and crossovers and designs. It's really... Once again, Naveed overdid it, and I'm going to get mad at him until it's done, and then I go, thank you for all the amazing data I can market with.
Right.
I do want to talk about the history, but I don't want to miss another subject that I think is really important to you.
My two big ones would be, it would be also talking about neonatal.
That's it. That's exactly what I wanted you to talk about.
And then our other big initiative, so along the way, you imagine I'm sitting here on my computer, I'm doing my market research. How big's the market? Mm-hmm. You're putting those little statistics into the little boxes that go on slide 3 of the investor deck. Mm-hmm. And I hit a website that's talked about neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome, also called neonatal abstinence withdrawal syndrome. And I clicked on a button, took me to YouTube, and I saw a picture of a baby just screaming and shaking, and it's an unnatural scream, and it's just like this horrid, rigid shaking. And these babies basically born exposed to opioids in utero, or born, say they're not addicted, they're born dependent, physically dependent on the opioids, and they just go through hell for the first 20, 30 days of their life. The average stay in the NICU for a baby born with NOWs is 23 days. So I email my partners, and I was like, we got to do something about this. Like, we got this company, it's going to be successful. And they both emailed back, well, yeah, of course we do.
That's why they're your partners,
so probably just we were like, okay, let's figure this out. Well, I was on my way to San Francisco to go to a neurotech conference, The next day, the third guy who stands up presents his work in auricular neurostimulation for babies. He's the only person who stimulated a baby's ear in the world that I know of, and he's standing right in front of me 24 hours after I said, let's tackle this problem. And I about tackled him coming off the stage. He thought I was a weirdo. I was like, we're going to be friends.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm not stalking you, but there's a lot to talk about.
Trust me, we know that feeling. We have those moments too. We talk about it all the time. And then you kind of mildly embarrass yourself, and then it's good.
Well, and so we got an NIH grant and did an eight baby study with them. It's published. It's funny that got published before the adult study, which just was amazing. So we were able to wean. So the way the standard of care for babies going through this is you slowly taper them off morphine, oral morphine, for like 24 days. So you're taking an underdeveloped child with an underdeveloped liver, hitting it with a toxic substance. I mean, morphine's toxic to the body, and after they've already been exposed in utero, and they're starting life off really rough with a lot of other problems.
Absolutely.
Like the list of other problems on those profiles are just heartbreaking. But we were able to get the morphine taper from 23 days to 7, and that was with only 2 hours of stim a day. We would stim for 30 minutes, check them. If they were good, taper down the morphine. Then when it's time again, so it's a totally different study design. I mean, truly, none of us knew what to expect. We were very careful, and you have a very small life here in your hand, but luckily, we got IRB approval, which is sort of the official way you get approval to do the clinical study that says, okay, you're doing everything ethically and appropriately, and we believe there's no inappropriate risk or whatever. The other guys, I think it took them 2 years to get IRB approval for their device. We piggybacked that, and we went through it, and I think it took us 2 months. Wow. Because they had forged the way, and that was Medical University of South Carolina. So, I mean, just an amazing institution doing amazing works. They pioneered the safety profile for us ahead of time. I would give them credit for that. And it was a tough study. It wasn't designed to get us through FDA. It was designed to see if it worked. We didn't know how the nerves were developed at that point in time. We didn't know anything. It was just truly, trying to figure out the science. So we're about to do a big baby study, and to get that. That sounds like
I love it.
The big baby study.
It's not big babies. It's a big study about babies.
Grown men complaining. Yeah, big baby
exactly.
study. Yeah.
So we're going to kick that off hopefully by the end of the year.
How cool.
I want that to go faster. It's just harder. I mean, everything's harder about it. We need more sites. That's other thing we're really proud of. We have a bunch of other ideas, but right now it's focused on those two clinical indication expansions, and then get this into people's hands. We have people coming through the website every day, like, how can I get this? And the stories will just break your heart. And they're like, I need this for my daughter. I need this for my wife. How can I get this? And it's like, we don't even have a doctor in your area. So we're building all the tools and everything to do that. We're very careful on funding. We didn't raise too much money. We don't have a fancy office. That also meant we didn't build anything at risk. Remember that binary event, which was the FDA? Mm-hmm. It was like, I need a good chunk of money if we don't get that FDA approval, if we have to rerun study, add patient. We just didn't know what to expect. So it was kind of like we were caught flat-footed, but we knew it.
Right.
And then the other problem is COVID. For the last year, we haven't been able to go to a convention or anything and talk to docs. So we haven't been doing the normal thing. So it's been like starting up the rusty tin man from scratch, right? It's like, all right,
takes a minute.
Yeah, it does. So we're only, 4 months into this, but have some real good wins. Some of the large behavioral facility chains bringing us on board. So there'll be some press and releases coming in the coming weeks.
Very cool.
I wasn't sure if you were public on that yet or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So when it goes public, send it to us, and we'll be sure to
No doubt.
push it out for you guys.
I'll get you on Jackie's PR list.
That'd be great. That'd be really good. This whole thing about neonatal, talk about a traumatic event. And if that happens when you're taking your first breath, what you're doing is a godsend, really. And I mean, it's remarkable because these poor little creatures are coming in such pain, and they didn't ask for any of this. So I think what you're doing is nothing short of a miracle.
And sometimes, and imagine the first month of their life, they can't go, say the mother is legitimately on, let's say, buprenorphine. Let's say they're in recovery and they're on a bup, which does have an opioid in it, and they get pregnant. It's against medical advice to detox while pregnant because the stress on the body, you could lose the baby. So they're forced to go to term and deliver the baby. So let's say, and they're on legitimate pain pills or whatever. For those babies, not being able to go home with the mom for 24 days is bad enough. And so if we can get them out and in the mom and going home and being a family as fast as possible, that's good. Unfortunately, there's a lot of them that are just going to be going to CPS.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. We had ones, we couldn't find the mom to consent the baby to do the study. They wouldn't return our phone call. They had the baby and they were gone. Yeah. And I mean, we hunted her down because we were like, we're saving this baby. Well, not saving it, but we're going to give it a better life.
Well, and this is something I wanted to ask you about. I mean, even after this podcast, you and I will have to have a conversation about this. And it's so funny. Patty knows me so well. She was talking about you the other day, and then she was like, all right, now you got to hear what this guy's doing. And then she set me up, and I was like, she's really setting me up for something. And it was the neonatal aspect of it.
Yeah, that was really what I was doing. You're right.
I'm curious about this, and if this is something that we want to go in a different direction, we can. But you're one of the first business people that I have met where it seems like your philosophy is a lot like Gandhi's of, let's work with the most vulnerable member of society. The people, now that's just a Gandhi quote, but that's something that we talk about a lot. Like, where do we put our focus? Where do we put our effort? Where do we put our gifts, our whatever? My logic is, let's put it in the most vulnerable members of society. And I'm just curious, I don't want to lead you too much, but you've already talked in several ways that it seems like that's on the forefront of your company. Like, I hate to use the term culture, it's used to death. But is that accurate? It seems like you're doing that.
I don't think we've articulated it that way. I mean, my wife several times said the universe needs this.
Absolutely.
And we feel that very much. We feel like we should give back to science. I kind of have the opinion that we will there's a couple things that will start to address this. Why other companies can't do that is because their job is to go public or be public. And so then it's all about this quarter's earnings.
Right.
What we're not going to do is that. And Simon Sinek, I don't know if you follow him as a business leader, he's hitting the nail on the head. We have companies, shareholder supremacy concept that it's all about this quarter and maximizing the share price. It doesn't allow you to run a healthy business. Right. I want a healthy cash flow positive business. And then we can do good things and contribute. And that's why we always said if this doesn't make money, we're doing it anyway. Right. And I think, look, altruistically or selfishly, that's still going to pay off because that culture, there's a bunch of physicians and they just see greedy pharma. I mean, pharma is vilified all day long,
right?
But they do a lot of great stuff. I think if we can truly act this way, put our employees first, and then we'll put the customers first, who then our investors will get a healthy routine return. But we're not going to maximize every dollar and then not spend money on stuff that the world needs.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, I mean, coming from someone 20 years of working, Richard's Group and those kind of agencies, it's incredibly unusual to find a business person, much less someone that has something like this, take that approach. And I'm not just saying that to make you feel good. I'm saying that to identify for the listeners, it's a different energy. Like, a lot of times, I told you I was in startups forever. You get through all of the spiel of what's so awesome and what's so great, and then at the end they're like, and we're going to give like 0.5% to some kind of charity, and that checks the box. And that 0.5% makes an impact somewhere, I'm hoping. But what I love about this, and I didn't expect, is how in the trenches you really are, like looking for that mom, like trying to really move this. That's not something that I come across very often. And it's just, the energy, the product's incredible, but the energy and the spirit around what you guys have created is even greater.
Oh, thank you.
In my opinion, for someone you didn't meet, before 30 minutes ago. But I think we're seeing more and more of this in this new era where people are tired of being jaded. We all know that people are taking the money, people are going public, banks are being bailed out. We get it. But there's people who are going, I'm just not going to participate in that program. We just won't go do that so we don't have to participate by those rules. It's the same way that we established our organizations. There's a very standard way that most nonprofits operate, and a lot of times, and there's nothing wrong with it, but we say it all the time, a lot of times it's walks and runs and dinners, but that's not the same as being involved in the cause. And I don't know, I just love how involved. This isn't some top tier, hey, we have an idea, let's get some people to go develop it. I mean, your eyes exude the passion. Not that anyone can see that. But I just love it, man. I really do.
It's backed by a great team. Like, we bring people on board carefully, and I didn't mind you saying culture. Like, we sat down and listed out, how do we want to be? And so half the company had been laid off from something they'd given their heart and soul to more than once. Like I said, I worked at a startup, and I quit my good-paying job, and I was like, I'm going to do this, and I was all in, and the thing just went under, and you're just like, man. And then you look at the reasons why, and they were bad actors. But then I worked for, like I said, big medical device company, and the medical device excise tax came out under the, I don't want to call it Obamacare. I try not to say it. What's the Affordable Care Act? Affordable Care Act. Do you edit that?
Sure. Yep.
Yep. The Affordable Care Act, and so they use that as an excuse to have 9 layoffs, and one every 3 months. And I watched people's careers get destroyed. And it was just for the stock market.
Right.
We were doing good. Right. Nothing changed from Monday to Tuesday other than that act. And the financials were going to look different. And so they were like, all right, but it was power grabs, and
of course.
And I described that place. I was like, I'm like in a James Bond movie, but the bad guy keeps winning.
The laser works every time. Yeah.
The bad guy just won.
It's not a fun movie.
He didn't read that
all.
script. He's not supposed to win.
Yeah, we don't like those movies.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. We all saw that a lot, and saw just bad decision making, bad management. I mean, companies today don't do a good job of training their managers to be people managers, and it's hard to do it when you think, if you make a mistake, you're going to get slaughtered for it,
right,
or fired or blamed or whatever. But if you're in a forgiving, I mess up all the time. I make sure we had a whole thing when we made our Mu Kappa Delta T-shirts. Sorry if I get off in the weeds, but
it's okay.
I messed it up, and I said it was Mu Kappa Gamma, and I got the third Greek word wrong. And the reason is because I look like a G, but it was the Delta, because I don't know what the Greek letters are. And so we had them printed, and then we surprised everybody. We had a big dinner, all 15 people, and my partner David, he's the neuroscientist. He's like, "That's wrong." And I went, "Well, you're the chief science officer. Why didn't you catch this?" and it was just picking on him.
Yeah.
And then I was like, "No, I totally screwed this up." It was like. Yeah. We just laughed. So we had a competition, and everybody had to destroy their T-shirt and make something
in a different way.
And they had to make something. So people made stuffed owls out of us.
That's great.
And we just had and everybody got their new shirts.
Good.
But you treat an environment where you don't burn people down for messing up.
Yeah. It just frees people up to operate from a place of compassion, a place of empathy, because again, when you are in a money-dominated environment, empathy is one of the first things that becomes a weakness a lot of times. And in the startup space in particular, it's really interesting to walk the line of a social impact, social good, financially responsible, all those things that you want to hit. In the startup space, a lot of times one of those falls down, and then that startup goes under,
And it is, medical devices, you are lucky because you're always helping a life. So you get that inherent lift.
Yeah.
You get to go home and go, yeah, man, my product helped someone today.
Doing
so
something.
I'm in. That's why I said I fell in love the moment I got on board with advanced neuromodulation systems. And
It's awesome. It's awesome.
So we're going to give you a chance to explain your T-shirt because you made reference to it. Yeah, so go ahead and tell everybody.
So I have a bright orange T-shirt on because I had to, because we do everything against the grain. So we have a device that shocks people. So we call the company Spark. People are always like, "Hey, did you know they might interpret that as?" And I'm like, "Yeah, oh, that slipped by us."
Yeah, I never
we
thought
didn't
of
see that coming at all.
And all medical devices, you look at how many of them that begin with the word neuro or neuron and nervous, and they're all dark blue color. So we're bright orange.
Nice.
And then I have a T-shirt that looks like I'm in a fraternity called Mu Kappa Delta, but those are the 3 opioid receptors that we fill when we drive endorphin production. So someone came up with an idea. They were like, "Why don't we make like fraternity shirts? We'll all wear them at conventions, and then people ask you what I was on the plane today." Lady went, "Well, what is that?"
Yeah. No, that's brilliant.
Yeah, and you just founded it recently, so tell me, what is their service?
Yeah, man, 2018. When we walked up, I really did, like, in all seriousness, I was like, this guy's really chill. He's wearing a frat shirt to our, cool.
Yeah, all right then. So you talked about how you're really proud of your team. Do you want to talk about any of the talent that's on there? What kind of backgrounds that they are bringing, and how is this going to advance your organization to be able to get a doctor for all of these people that are reaching out to you?
Highlight some of the main team members.
Sure.
So I founded it with Alejandro Kovalin and Naveed Kadaparist. They had worked together in a previous life. We had all kind of worked together and crossed paths earlier and really got along. And Alejandro has a PhD in neuroengineering from, I think, UCLA. Sorry, Alejandro, if I forgot. And he's been doing this for 25 years. He is a brilliant inventor. He always knows, like, something will come up about some other disease like cancer, and he goes, "Oh, well, such and such." I'm like, "How do you know that?" Like, whatever we talk about, he knows something about it. And for being probably, I think he's the smartest person I've ever met. Super nice, just a really nice, humble guy, and again, brilliant inventor. Naveed is our chief science officer. He got his PhD in neurophysiology from UTD. They have a real good neuro program right here, and he is just, everybody loves him. He's our secret weapon to take in front of doctors. You take the doctor who's ready to just burn us to the ground. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Skeptic. We had one investor. His brother he was on Wall Street, and his brother was a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. I think he's a neurosurgeon. And he was like, "I don't know." And he was like, "You got to talk to our brother." And there was a network of people, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, this isn't going to go well at all." Like, he's not easy. By the end of the call, the doctor, the neurosurgeon, was like, "No, this is great. We should do it. Thanks, bye." And he hung up, and the other brother was like, "I've never seen that happen before ever."
Oh my gosh!
So Naveed's brilliant.
Thank you, Naveed.
He's my secret weapon. We put him in front of a doctor, and just because he so genuinely knows, he reads every piece of, both of him and Alejandro read every piece of literature, but he's so knowledgeable, and then he can make it easy to understand. Super easy. And
That's a talent.
We have a couple others. Our COO is Chris Hanna. We picked him up from a startup that he ran operations up to 50 million plus a year. So he's just got off, just done this once before, the last 8 years of his life. Amazingly detailed, knows everything about supply chain and keeping our costs down. And but what's really cool, he's another one of these stories. I had enough money for one spot, but I needed someone to lead reimbursement and someone to lead operations. Well, Chris happens to also teach U.S. health policy at SMU on the side and ran part of the reimbursements division of advanced neuromodulation systems. So we had worked together, and I was like, "Well, that obvious."
Works. Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, you're hired." He was like, "No, I'm going to interview you for the next 3 weeks." I was like, "What? No, just come aboard. Just trust me. This is good."
Just come to work. You can hire me or interview me later.
Yeah. So I was tell him, yes, I've never been interviewed not to have a job longer than that. Yeah. But he wanted to make sure, he was an operations guy. He wanted to make sure what he's getting into was sound. And then Carl Pollack is our CFO, and he and I work together at St. Jude. And great guy, built our business model. Built all, and so we have a couple of investors that go through and they really want to get into the details of the business model. And I'm over here just like chewing on my fingernails like, oh no, I sure hope Carl survives this because these guys are really good.
Yeah.
And they would tear through it, and he had an answer for every question. I was like, I'm so glad you built a really good business model that they're like, oh, did you capture this expense? He goes, yeah, I do this percentage of G&A. And I was like, look at that. That's fantastic. Yeah. So he's great. And he's been incredible to work with me because I've never raised money before.
Yeah.
And so like going and doing my first pitches and, like, okay, do I understand the terms and all this stuff? But
that's great.
Luckily, raising money hasn't been really difficult. So.
And again, that's an unusual statement from most startups, especially in this kind of environment. I mean, have you been able to raise money during the pandemic?
Oh, I'm shaking
He's
my
shaking
head.
his head, yes.
I'm going to translate.
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks not just to the product, but I mean to the way you guys are pitching it. And again, I'm just like Mr. Feel Good guy today, I realize, but this is what Patty and I talk about all the time. When the passion and everything is there, it's not hard to get the money, and it's not hard to find the right people.
Yeah, that's, and I won't go through the rest of the team, but sorry, the rest of the team.
You're all awesome.
We value every one of you.
There you go.
Yeah, well, even our lead investors are just fantastic. My lead investor used to be a distributor of mine in Europe for deep brain stimulation, and it was actually one of those things. Like, I always took care of them in Europe. In American medical device, a lot of times Europe gets treated like a redheaded stepchild, like, because there's so much more. Like, which country we're going to go to after America? Well, okay, Germany, okay, and the UK, but
Right.
It's easy to just sort of dismiss it because of the economics. You start in America economically.
Gotcha.
We just
Yeah.
spend so much more on healthcare. So the Europeans can tend to be ignored and have poor support from U.S. Well, my product was only sold in Europe. It wasn't approved in the U.S. yet, and I loved. I mean, my job was to make them, as a product manager. My job was to make sure the product was successful in the field and support everybody around it. And I took that real serious. Well, 10 years later, he was like, "Hey, what's this thing you're working on?" And I was like, this. And he's like, "Oh, I might want to invest." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "How much?" In my first round, I raised $472,000, and my largest check was $50,000.
Yeah.
Most of the checks were 25 or 12, and that was fine. I was very happy. I was astounded. I was only going to raise $250, and then people kept giving me money, and I kept going. Carl, the CFO, is like, "If people are offering you money, you take it.
Yeah.
You don't say I'm full."
Yeah.
So he was like, he goes, "I might put a couple $100,000 in." I was like, "Oh my gosh, a couple $100,000." Like, okay. So we had a big dog and pony show, and his wife came in. She's a partner in their business, and he calls me up and he's like, "Okay, we're in for $1 million." I was just like, oh, and they're like family. I have board members that are like family, and they're rooting for us. And then the funny thing is, he transferred the money over, but he accidentally transferred euro and not dollar. So it was $1,136,000. And his wife goes, "He's just going to spend that on a car. We're putting it all in here."
That's incredible. So they didn't even take it back. They're like, just leave it in there. And
Yeah.
These are good people.
You could use it later.
Yeah.
No, they're great people.
Yeah.
So how do we get the people who are coming to your website satisfied? I want to make sure that we can get the people who need to get your work attended to at some point. I know it's just the beginning, but talk about how you're going to get the doctors on board and how in the future, when you have this up and running the way you want it to, that it's going to work.
Yeah, so right now there's on the website, you can go in and put if you're a caregiver, a patient, an advocate, or a physician that's interested, and we already have the infrastructure to hook you up and start conversation. If there's not a doctor in the area, let's say you're looking for one, we have a new seed program where we plant a seed for a new area where we're looking for a doc to start, and we'll work with that. That's a little undefined right now if I don't have a nearby doc, but we should be able to find someone. I've run into literally, my sister's pain doctor didn't want to see us and didn't want to use the device, and I had to find another pain doctor for her. So there are doctors who are just not, they're just not motivated by that.
Right.
And then, so it's all there. We keep all that contact. we are following up fast and growing the commercial team. So I would say if there's interest, hop on the website, register. You can download the white paper that shows all the clinical results. That's real nice. And see this. There's also an insanely good testimonial video. I really encourage everybody to go watch.
Yes.
I still tear up every time it plays. So, had a bunch of people in the room when it was playing. I just walked out real quick until it was over, and I'll come in and do my speech part. It's so good.
It is very powerful. I've seen it.
Yeah. So, and that's sparkbiomedical.com.
Thank you. I was just going to ask.
I was too. He's a professional.
Yeah, done this at home.
I know we went a while. Do you want to try to hit just how we got here, or is it too much? The opioid epidemic.
I do like that information. I found that to be very interesting. So yes, let's.
And I can edit it back into a previous part.
Yeah. So we are on the third wave of the third opioid epidemic. So the first opioid epidemic happened after the Civil War, and basically the invention of morphine. Morphine was invented by a German scientist that figured out how to extract the chemicals out of the poppy plant. We had this U.S. post-Civil War epidemic. There was things like housewives were just at home, out of their mind. I mean, they were straight up taking opium or morphine. And those who described it like it was destroying the family fabric of America.
Right. Yeah.
I think 1914, we passed basically the first Controlled Substances Act. I should have had all this memorized for this. They kind of got it under control, but that really nipped in the bud. The second wave was after the Vietnam War.
Right.
And the introduction of injectable heroin. Heroin, by the way, I think Bayer invented heroin. There's old ads from Bayer, and there's take heroin for your cold. Take heroin. There's old.
I need to see that now with heroin.
Just Google heroin advertising, and they're just hilarious. And it just cures everything. There's you see the list on the bottle, and it's 50% alcohol, heroin, this, that. You're oh my gosh, what were you doing there? Yeah. So the soldiers coming home from the Vietnam War and the introduction of street injectable heroin, which of course made it go farther, and that got stamped out fairly reasonable. We had the war on drugs, and that and then other drugs, I guess, took over. So the third heroin epidemic in America became when Purdue Pharma convinced the FDA that there was no addictive quality to their new OxyContin drug. And they went on to do some of the most brilliant but diabolical marketing ever. They created the fifth vital sign. So back in the day, so this was all came down in the 90s. Back, the vital sign, you're going to check your breathing and your pulse and all that. Well, they created the fifth vital sign, and that's pain. And that's tantamount to malpractice if you're not worried about your patient's pain. And they just did this full-scale push. They were taking FDA people to dinner all the time. There's a book called American Overdose. If you want to get really angry at our government and how they let this go, I would listen to it or buy it. So Purdue Pharma basically created this crazy amount of prescriptions. And then it got stuck in bureaucratic hell with who has jurisdiction over it. FDA, the CDC, or whoever should be telling doctors what to prescribe, not you, FBI. And FBI's over there, yeah, but these are drugs. No, those aren't illegal drugs. Those are, So this FBI agent in the book went to shut down Cardinal Health's distribution system, which, is one of the three major pharma distributors in the world. And congressmen are calling him up and and senators and yeah, you can't do that. You can't enforce the laws. And so you had millions of pills going through these pill mills, and people just showing up, lined up out the door around the building, walking through, getting prescriptions, and then they would go to the same pharmacy, and the pharmacy would fill it, and everybody knew. Right. There's that show, The Pharmacist, on Netflix.
I watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible. The real footage of people standing around the building waiting, and she was just writing scripts.
And everybody knows.
Yeah.
And so it really took a long time to get acknowledgement and awareness of this. There's a lot of money. So with the billions of dollars that have come from, Purdue Pharma fought it tooth and nail. The Sackler family fought it tooth and nail. Finally, had admitted criminal wrongdoing, and Purdue Pharma is no more. I think it's officially like closed, and so all those assets are being used to fund treatment for but then you get to treatment, and we have a treatment nightmare. You got a lot of places, there's another Netflix documentary called The Business of Addiction. You have to pay for it. It's like $14.99, but it's really good, and it'll just make you even more mad at, there's a lot of facilities that they're just taking your money, they get you in the door, and they're not qualified to be, they don't have an addiction specialist really on board. They're just, or they're just a retreat. Right. You get to ride horses and spa. So there's a lot of improvements. It's very difficult to treat, obviously, but it's, and then very difficult. And you got the biology and the psychology aspect. Mm-hmm. So what we say is we can take care of the biology, we can take care of the malfunctioning systems, or at least that's our intent, but you still need the psychology. You still have underlying trauma that brought you here or something. You still have underlying, now that you're not fuzzy-headed and you're not on drugs and you see what you have to clean up, that could be enough to just make you not want to be there.
Feeling that, they're feeling those things for the first time in a decade or more.
Without the natural endorphins
that's right.
being produced to handle stressors. So you get an argument, and you can't even process it like a normal person. It's just rage as the response.
Just no regulation. Now, to your point, that's because they had been on a drug for so long that the body stopped producing what it needed.
Yep.
Now you remove the synthetic drug, and now they're just at zero, like at a deficit, basically, until the body kicks back in.
Which that's what we hope
we
can do for our long-term addiction recovery.
Kick it back in.
Yeah, can we give it a jump start, get it going, then let it run on its own. So that's our hypothesis. I'm not saying we can do that, but we're going to prove it one way or the other.
And when you prove it, you're going to be willing to publish it. So
yeah, absolutely.
I just think this is so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for you and for the benefit that it's going to bring to so many people.
No doubt.
Well,
as a quick question, maybe it's not a quick answer, how long is it going to take the body to get started producing those endorphins again, do you think?
Well, we drive the production, we believe, immediately already, but doing it on its own, we hypothesize 90 days.
Okay, great. We covered a lot of the subjects that I know we wanted to. Is there anything that we need to talk about specifically, either a subject or your company or anything else that we did not get on? Okay.
Daniel, I absolutely love the spirit and energy. It's funny, the product's incredible, but I've really enjoyed just talking with you. Your general, your heart around this is awesome.
Well, thank you.
And I think we're going to start seeing more and more people like you and your staff moving into spaces like this. And I'm just honored to have met you this early on in it. It's super, super cool.
Well, thank you.
So listeners, obviously, check out the website. What was the website again?
SparkBiomedical.com.
And check out our website, channelsofhealing.com, for more episodes. And we will see you in the next episode.
Actually, it's Channels of Health.
What did I say?
Healing.
Dang it, it's our own show. That's amazing.
After you've done...
You need to put that clip.